Listen, I have to make a confession here that I didn't know much at all about whales, but I was fascinated with this background sheet, one of which is a big deal to me, that hearing aids were first developed by Welshman Edwin Stevens. Well, I lost my hearing and actually started in the Air Force. And so hearing aids are a big deal to me. It's it's the most I've ever read about whales. So.
You're in demand for obvious reasons right now, and we're very fortunate. Your career is extraordinary, and you end up in 2010 serving President Barack Obama as the Director of National Intelligence, a position I believe that you held for nearly 7 years. Brief us a little bit on maybe some of the high and low points.
Well, the high moment, I'd have to say, was the takedown of UBO. That was closure for the country, closure certainly for the intelligence community. And I'll never forget this one vignette. We've been closeted all day in the White House Situation Room watching this thing unfold. And when we were about 95% sure through DNA that it was in fact UBO, it was time for the president to address the country. And so I'll never forget walking out of the West Wing, and you've seen this scene on television a lot where you walk along the portico by the Rose Garden. And as soon as I opened the door, and of course the word had gotten out of what had happened, and there was a crowd across the street in Lafayette Park chanting USA, USA, USA. And then it hit me emotionally, what had just happened, what it meant for the country, what it meant for the intelligence community, because this is a failure on our part. And it was the model partnership between intelligence and, in this case, special operations. It really worked beautifully.
Right from the beginning, clearly technology has been a significant influence on your career, on your life, and it continues to be.
There are many factors that have influenced change in the intelligence community. Obviously, the behavior of the capabilities of the adversary. Failures, have affected. In fact, a failure occasioned the most profound reorganization of intelligence since the National Security Act of 1947. But the single factor that's had more impact on change in the U.S. intelligence community is technology. Yeah. And technology is what has driven change in our community. And as I look back when I was a young lieutenant in Vietnam, the capability we have today to amass huge volumes of data, to synthesize it and report it at the speed of light almost is truly amazing. But all technology has a two-edged sword. Fire is a great thing for mankind, but if it's abused or gets out of control, it's bad. Well, so it is with our technology today. And our country, the U.S., is suffering from the bad malapplication of intelligence and the spread of disinformation. And we've seen a recent graphic example of the result of that on the 6th of January, where a fanatic crowd of people who believe a big lie, they're consumed with it. And so this is all a result of cyber technology and all the good things that the internet does for us. But it is, when there are downsides to it, and we are suffering from that today.
Are we in the West? Let me add the UK, the Five Eyes group, and the US. Are we keeping pace? Do we have enough control?
No, we don't. I can speak specifically in this country. And we, again, using a recent graphic negative example of the 6th of January, and you've seen this. First of all, internationally, we don't have control. There are no real cyber norms. And until such time as the big three, if you will, don't mean this disparagingly for anybody else, but until such time as China, Russia, and the United States can agree on some norms of behavior and have enforcement mechanisms, it's going to be the Wild West in the cyber domain. And domestically, In 1934, the United States established what's called the Federal Communications Commission. And its purpose was to regulate broadcast radio, both technically in assigning frequencies and the like, but also substantively, the content of what was permissible to be broadcast on radio. And it was later extended to television. We have nothing comparable for social media companies, which have gotten too big and are too powerful, and also very profitable. They're near monopolies, and they need some form of regulation, no question about it. Now, having said that, I would not want to be the action officer sitting in a blank screen drawing up what the rules would be that the government would enforce, because in our country, just like yours, there are civil liberties considerations, our First Amendment, free speech. And so, we had this endless argument about, people can't yell fire in a crowded theater and, that sort of thing. But clearly, we need to do something about what our country suffers from, a very apt, clever term by the Rand Corporation, that is truth decay. And we have a very bad case of truth decay in this country, where people have devolved into their own reality bubbles, fed by social media. When people have witnessed with their own eyes the videos of the behavior of these people that rioted, raided, attacked our capital, which is traditionally a hallowed place that's treated reverentially. And if you can't agree on a basic set of facts, you got a real problem. And we have a real problem in this country.
Is there anything missing that you think that the private sector could be building that would help?
We need to push on artificial intelligence as a way of synthesizing, correlating data that's so voluminous that the humans can't cope with it. And that's the challenge the U.S. intelligence community has. The vulnerability that needs the most work, in my view, is supply chain fidelity. The reliability of the supply chain, whether hardware or, as we've learned, software. And I'm not sure what the answer there is. And I would look to technologists in those particular areas that I have some experience in as having great potential.
I think I would add to what you said, which, by the way, I think was exactly the answer that I think people need to hear. The other thing that is noticeable, of course, is speed and quality is in such demand from the digital world that people are drawing upon open source software. They are moving from whiteboard to keyboard to production incredibly quickly. And that the relationships, certainly in the company that I have the pleasure of being the CEO of, are needing more and more to ensure that testing process in production is happening to prevent vulnerabilities, to prevent trust being eroded, security being compromised, and to maintain the kind of brand relationship that is flawless. And that speed is increasing and increasing and increasing. And so there's a need for more and more tools to ensure that the test process happens throughout the CI/CD pipeline to protect consumers, as well as to give them the experience that they need. Are there any technologies that have come into your life of late that have changed your world?
A damn iPhone is the center of my life. I hate that, but it's true, and I depend on it for so much. The problem is we think of great new things to do for mankind and improve our lives. We haven't been so good in policing up the evil aspects. The fundamental problem, of course, is that if you are connected to the internet in any way, you are vulnerable. It's just a fact. The other thing is, people ask me about the cyber threat. Well, cyber itself is neutral. It's not cyber per se that's a threat. It's the actors in the cyber domain that pose a threat. I always like to make that semi-philosophical point.
Jim, in your career and life, if you were to pull out one or two people in leadership positions that you have greatly admired, who would they be?
Well, a couple of people you never heard of had a huge impact on me. After I came back from Vietnam, I had, this shows you how little things can affect your whole life. I was all set to get out of the Air Force. I was just marking time until my time was up. And one day I got a call from a friend of mine. He and I had gone through technical training at a place called Goodfellow Air Force Base, which is way out in West Texas, near San Angelo, Texas. And he'd gone off to an assignment. I think he got assigned to Pakistan, and I ended up in Vietnam. And then we reunited at Kelly Air Force Base at the headquarters for what was then the U.S. Air Force cryptologic arm. So one day he gave me a call and said, would you interview and he was a classmate of mine. And so he said he applied and got accepted to pilot training. So he said, would you be interested in being the aide to the commander of security service, who was a 2-star general? I said, well, what's an aide do? And he said, well, you help the general and keep him on schedule and handle his correspondence, and you travel with him and help him. I said, okay. So I went and interviewed, and sure enough, got the job. Well, that led to a series of mentors, this general and his successor, who kept me on. And that affected, the rest of my career. And that's why I've always been a big proponent of mentoring people. That's a term we didn't use back then, but that's what it was. Helping people behind you, young people, subordinates that someday will be in positions of leadership. And I'm still doing that today, with people in the intelligence community are mentees of mine. So it's an important concept. It taught me a lot about practical leadership.
Thank you for your service for so many years and for your integrity and your own personal compassion. It's an honor to serve on a board with you. And I am increasingly honored to enjoy your friendship and your mentorship. So thank you. We appreciate you.
Well, Alan, thank you. That's very generous. I appreciate that. I'm very touched by that. Thoroughly enjoyed it. The time flew by, and I really appreciate your having me.